neutral setting is. And again, if you have a cheaper camera, you can't really do that, which is fine. You can still tell a good story, but if you want the best looking video, you're going to be using some pretty good gear, and you're going to have knowledge on how to edit it properly, which you will. So we'll go back to the menu. That's pictures. So frame rate and resolution. So you can choose many different things. If you want to do slow-mo, you want to do 1280. Like, oh, what are you doing? Don't you zoom that? Okay, so it's down to 720p, but it shoots in 60 frames per second here. So you can slow that down and still have a smooth image for slow-mo. You never want to do that ever. I don't know why I even have that feature. Are you zooming? There we go. Okay. This is 1080p at 30 frames per second. And then the ideal standard, like what movies are shown as, it's just been the standard for a long time, and it looks a lot better. Don't do that. Is 24 frames per second. That's just how films are made. And that's, if you want the filmic look, you're going to want to film in 24 frames per second, if you have the option. Alright, so now let's just dive right into Magic Lantern. So Magic Lantern is, where's my battery dying? It's only dying. Oh, I got another one. So Magic Lantern is a firmware that you can put on an SD card, which is great because the camera's firmware is what you were looking at. Basically, you know what firmware is? Alright, firmware is basically the software that runs specific hardware. So like this camera has hardware that's specific to it, and firmware is what tells it what to do, basically. It's like kind of like a very, very basic level of an OS.
Okay.
It tells the computer what to do and like how stuff interacts with one another. Same thing with cameras. Firmware does that. Magic Lantern is actually like, you won't see most of this on your display when you get the camera itself. Like you won't see all that stuff on the bottom. You probably won't see the grid. That's all Magic Lantern. Actually, I'm just going to put a fresh battery in here while I'm talking. So it's free, which is amazing. Like I donated money to them because they do an awesome service for us. This quickly is putting this up just almost in work today. There was enough room the other day for me to open this door. Damn, I have to take it off. Anyways, so Magic Lantern, what was I saying? Okay, free, and basically it's a third-party firmware that you install on the SD card that puts almost an overlay on top of the camera's firmware. So it doesn't change the camera's firmware at all. And so you can take it off anytime. Once you remove that SD card, it's out of the camera. Like it doesn't at all affect the system, which is fantastic. But it adds like a lot of professional functionality to your camera. Adds an amazing array of features. So it's really cool. And we'll go over that in a second once I get this all set. Alright.
So Magic Lantern could go on any camera?
No. They're strictly Canon DSLRs, and they have different versions for different Canon cameras. But the majority of like the nice DSLRs from Canon have Magic Lantern.
Okay. Which Canon camera is that?
This is the T3i.
T3i?
Or 600D.
Okay.
Yeah. So, alright, so this is the menu for Magic Lantern. It's got a lot. I'm just going to go over a few of them, kind of tell you what they are. So, don't worry about the global draw. Zebras. This is a pretty freaking cool function. So what Zebras is it displays where an image is overexposed. And I don't know, like Magic Lantern is a little bit weird with displaying stuff through the HDMI, so we'll see how that works. That is overexposed. the lights are obviously overexposed. Now, you wouldn't have to worry about that, but this basically just shows where a surface has a lot of light on it and it's unrecognizable, which is really cool. So you're good. Look at that. You're perfect. All right, so now, go back into here. Now, focus peak, it's very similar, but it shows what is in focus. That is the one that I use above anything else, and this is the one that doesn't really display well on TVs. Yeah, see, it dirts out. I'll just show you that. But basically, you can see what is in focus when it lights up that green.
That's what is in focus?
Yes. So you see how that surface is green? That surface is in focus. Drop back there, that surface is in focus. It's really, really, really cool. And that way, like, when you can't really see if it's like really bright out, and it's kind of hard to see what's in focus, sometimes it is, then that will allow you to know like that surface is in focus. The camera recognizes that it's in focus, and it's awesome. I'll turn that off, and then Magic Zoom is the other one. So Magic Zoom, it's basically if you want to see something far away, if something's far away and you want to make sure it's in focus, then you just go like so, and that little crosshair thing, that's where it zooms like crazy. So you can see, like, from here, you can't really tell if that sign is in focus or not. You hover over it, yeah, that's not in focus, but then you're like, oh, it's focusing right up. Boom. So, it can be useful.
That's really nice.
Yeah. It's really cool. Magic Lantern, that's where it's at.
It's freaking like Genie. Lantern.
Hello.
Hello. Sorry I'm late.
It's okay. I mean, you missed it.
Of course.
That's your fault, so. Alright. Moving on to the next thing. Crop marks. This is just kind of a cool feature that it adds. If you're going to be filming and then you're going to be adding the CinemaScope aspect ratio. So when you watch movies, it's in like super widescreen with the big black bars. Well, what this does is it gives a preview so you know what's in the shot. Really cool. And I utilize it fairly often. Whenever I do decide to actually put the CinemaScope on, then I use that. So I know, like, she's still in the shot. So I can still use that shot. Okay. And that off. And most of the stuff I'm not sure. Histogram is one thing that is very important, but I actually have yet to learn it. I'm working on it. The histogram, right there, it shows all the levels of the different colors, and when you learn how to use that histogram, it's so powerful. I just gotta learn how to use it.
Learn it.
So I'm working on it. That way you can like properly expose a shot. You know, I mean, it's just, you can do a lot with it. But it looks like random, and you know that it looks formed.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll hop over the menu. This stuff's not important. There's that. There's that. Okay, so as I was talking about earlier, in shooting in a neutral video, contrast set to low. Yeah. I mean, I don't quite. Yeah, that's not really too much, is it? Does not work on external loss. Okay, gotcha. I'll have to show you guys. So you're gonna have to come over here. That's why. So that's what it looks like with zero contrast. That's very low, low, normal, and then you can turn the contrast way up, which you don't want to do. You don't want the camera dictating that. That's something that you do in editing. So I usually put it on low. I might try and mess around with very low. I haven't tried it yet. I might. But I usually do low, so that way I can add the contrast later in post-production. So then, go back, and then same thing, there's one for saturation, stuff like that. Okay. Okay. I think that's most of the settings in camera. Oh yeah, and then ISO. It's basically the sensor's sensitivity to light. So if it's too dark, you can turn up the ISO or turn down the ISO if it's too bright. Yeah, you get shutter speed. It's how fast the how long the shutter's open, basically. And usually with shutter speed, what you want to do is have it set. Ideally, you'd have it set to double the frame rate. So if you're shooting in 60 frames per second, you would have that at 120. Facebook. You'd have that set to 120. Whereas if you're shooting at 24 frames per second, you're going 48. But sometimes if you're outside and you have that's one thing is. Did those cameras come with filters as well?
Yeah.
Okay, so
They're just UV filters.
Oh, okay. So there are filters that you can put on camera, that neutral density filters. I've yet to actually get one. I need one. But basically, you can control it basically stops down the amount of light that goes into the camera, so you can have it set to a lower depth of field. Whatever. Hey.
Are you filming them?
No.
It's creepy. I can see him.
Well, I'm showing them.
Do you know what rock is that?
No. No. Okay, the aperture. So the aperture is basically. Okay, aperture. Say that it's gonna be. Okay, I'm gonna have to go over here. Oh wait, no. I want to look into the camera. Okay, so I'm gonna change the aperture, and you'll see that ring in there. Closing, and then opening it up again. So basically, what that is, the number you see for an aperture, right now it's set to f2, which is a pretty wide open aperture. And basically, the number that you see is a ratio of the diameter of the aperture to the distance from the sensor. So basically, if you think about it, it's here's the aperture, here's the sensor. If the aperture is like this and the sensor's right here, you got a pretty wide open aperture. So you'll see it got a lot brighter when I opened up to f2. Basically, that means that the aperture, let's see here, it's twice as far from the sensor as the diameter of the aperture. So if it was f2.8, the distance from the sensor to the aperture would be 2.8 times the distance of the diameter. That make sense? So basically, as you close that aperture down, that number becomes f22. That's as close as it'll get. Where basically it's 22 times farther from the aperture to the sensor as compared to the diameter of the aperture.
And it's going to be darker.
It's going to be a lot darker. Another thing with that is you'll notice how you're in focus, right? But it's all washed out back there, and it's out of focus. So I can put my hand right here, and you'll see that it's awesome. It's amazing what you can do with a shallow depth of field. And basically, what that is, when you have that wide open aperture, if you have the open aperture with, say the sensor's right here, you got this angle, and then you've all taken math. And with a wider aperture, brings this forward, the angle is much more open. And think of it as this angle going out like this, and only a certain range of that incline is going to be in focus. When you close that down, that incline becomes much less significant, and it opens up that depth of field. So much more then becomes in focus. So that was a really hard one for me to figure out and kind of understand. And I know I'm not giving a very amazing explanation of it, but that's sort of the general idea. So that's why this lens is fantastic. And that's what's great about DSLRs is you can have different lenses on them, which have those wide open apertures.
So a bigger aperture means a shallower depth of focus.
Kind of. an aperture that can open up further, you can get a shallower depth of field.
Okay, so then you would want to put on the UV filter, have a bigger aperture so that you can have the shot not be overexposed, but you can also have the shallow.
Correct. Now, one way that I currently compensate for that is I just crank the shutter speed up, which I haven't noticed make a huge difference, but if you're like working in like real, like you're making a movie, then you're going to be using filters. But it works. I haven't noticed a real decrease in quality at all with that. So if you're outside, just crank the shutter speed up and it'll darken the image because the shutter is only open for so long.
Yeah.
That's kind of how the shutter works. It opens and closes, and whatever amount of time that is, that's how much light can get in. If you're at 1/4000th of a second, you know how much light can get in. That's how it works.
Even if the apertures were giant.
Correct. So that's like one way to get around that. That works. Let's see what else is there. Is there really anything else? Yeah, I have the picture style set to neutral. Yeah, so that's basically like the in-camera like settings. So, good?
What's the vector scope?
I have no clue. There's a lot to Magic Lantern that I get to learn. Magic Lantern basically turns this into a like professional studio camera with the features it gives me. It's insane. Yes, it's free. Absolutely free. When I got this one, there was like a week before they released the update to this camera's firmware, and it was like, you can get it ahead of time by donating $7. I was like, hell yeah, you guys are awesome. So I gladly donated $7, and eventually, like, as I go through, if I continue using DSLRs, which I probably will, then I'll probably end up donating a lot more money then soon, because they're providing an incredible service for filmmakers that don't have money. You know, I mean, it's absolutely incredible what they've done. They've changed the independent filmmaking world by offering this. So it's like, you know, kind of a deal. Okay, so now I think moving on to audio. Okay, we'll talk about setting up like a framing and stuff like that, which I feel like most of you are pretty well in, but we'll talk about like how to set this. Okay, so we'll get rid of that. So, let's change something. Let's drop that ISO down. There we go. There it is. Okay, so some of you may know the rule of thirds. And I mean, it's just a rule that is aesthetically pleasing. Where what's great is I'm not sure if the T3i by default comes with this grid display. I'm not sure. I can't remember. I think it does. But that's what's nice about this grid display is you can always see exactly where that rule of thirds will be applied. Otherwise, you just want to make sure that whatever you're filming is in one of those intersections. That's just a basic rule. I mean, certain shots it doesn't necessarily apply to, but you usually want to follow that. Another thing to keep in mind is look room. Indie Mogul said it the other day. I can't remember the technical name.
I don't know what that is. Or I don't know what
It's basically like the space in front of the person. So if there's like two people having dialogue, right? And it's going back and forth between these two people. So you're talking to me, like, look like you're looking this way. See how there's a lot more space in front of her where she's looking than behind her? Well, if there's a dialogue scene between us, I would be the opposite. I would also have a lot of space in front of me and not much space behind me because it gives a distance between us. It would be confusing if you were still looking that way and I had the camera set up like that and she was having a dialogue scene with me. Because that is a shitload of wasted space. And then it makes us seem like we're closer than we are. You usually want to have that space of looking. Again, different camera angles require different takes, but for the most part, you want to follow that rule. Right? You want to give that space. Okay, what else was there? Of course, now this one you guys might not know, it's called the 180-degree rule. You know that.
Oh yeah.
So the 180-degree rule is arguably the most important rule in filmmaking. Like, the most important. And basically what that says is if we are having a conversation, there's a line between us. And whatever side I set that camera, it never crosses that line. Ever. So we're going to have a conversation. We have a camera set up there and a camera set up where that camera is. Because if we were to set up one camera there and one camera there, it looks like we're looking in opposite directions. Or in the same direction, but not at each other. It's horribly confusing, even when it's not dialogue. If you have like someone running, you stay on one side of them. Even if you're like behind them, you're at an angle. You don't ever cross that line. Like there's this video that kind of was demonstrating that, and there was like a movie that did it, where someone was like running down these sidewalks, and it crossed that line, and immediately you're like, where the hell are they? Like it confuses the viewer. Like it disorients people that are watching it, and it just makes it messy. So if you follow that 180-degree rule, it immediately makes everything look better. That's one thing you'll notice with some YouTubers, like people that put videos on YouTube that don't know that rule. Like once I learned that rule, I started seeing it everywhere. You watch a movie, guarantee you they will never break the 180-degree rule.
Except for Kubrick.
Except
In
for-
The Shining.
Yes. But Kubrick was a crazy bastard.
He's a crazy bastard.
And again, I mean, you can branch off of that, but you gotta have the right film, you gotta have it written properly. It has to be relevant if you're gonna break that rule. Like it has to be there for a reason to break it. But if there's not a reason and it's broken, you'll notice it. I guarantee you, the next movie you watch, if you're watching a movie, you see them break that rule, you're like, hey, that director's horrible. You know, and I mean, they'll know. Like, that's one of the things that you learn in film school. It's just one of those important things. So that's one thing that I kind of wanted to hit on pretty hard, was the 180-degree rule.
Let's see here.
Okay, so then there's, I talked about focus. One thing that's nice about like those wide apertures is it has that really narrow depth of field, and you can then play with focus. What's fun with that is, say you have a character in the video, and then they look like in a direction at something that's blurred out, but then if you change the focus to that, it blurs them and it transitions to where it's looking. That's why with video you never want autofocus on camera. Ever. Never. It is the devil for filmmakers. Because when it comes down to it, you never want the camera dictating where your viewers are looking. You are in control of the focus, you tell it when to change, and that's why autofocus is the devil. Because if it's focusing for you, then it's telling the story. You're not the one telling the story anymore. That is if you can work with focus. So say like, I'm like pointing at you, and then it's like, that person. See how I changed that? Like, I'm like, hey, you right there. Yes. So I mean, it can be a very powerful tool to use. Focus. So that's one thing to always keep in consideration. Let's see here. There are force perspective. Okay. So there's different kinds of force perspective. The person that is the absolute god at force perspective is Peter Jackson, director of Lord of the Rings, Hobbit. I don't know what is going through that man's head, but he is brilliant. When they have a set, like say it's just in a dining room with a table, right? They will have everyone on their own moving tracks. Like they have like Gandalf talking to Frodo, right? Frodo's on one side of the table, Gandalf's on the other. The table is in two pieces, and the dinnerware is larger on one than the other because Frodo's a hobbit. And so it has to look bigger for him as opposed to Gandalf. And then they are on their own moving tracks as well as the tables and the camera. And so as the camera's moving, those tables are like 15 feet apart. But the camera angle makes it look like it's one table. And because they're so far apart, Frodo looks tiny compared to Gandalf. As they move the camera, they move the subjects and everything. It's absolutely insane. So the amount you can do with perspective is crazy. A much simpler force perspective I don't really know if it's technically called force perspective. It's just a cool effect that you can do with a camera that gives a crazy feel. And it was, I'm pretty sure it was mostly popularized by the first Jaws movie. That's where like the first big instance of it showed up. Basically, that's where you see a person and the camera doesn't really move, but the surrounding moves. That is done by moving the camera towards a person while zooming out. So we're just playing around outside earlier, and this is kind of what we got. So just playing around. Let's see it a little more. So again, we did not put much effort into that, but if you do, it can be really cool. It's very applicable for certain kinds of scenes. It gives this like closing feeling on a person, like it singles that person out. So it's really fun. Just something like that. But you can't use this lens for that. You got to use something the same. Okay. So, and then I guess from there I can talk about lenses a little bit. That is the 50mm prime lens. And because it's a prime lens, I can get that f1.8, that wide open aperture, super crisp image. Like, it is a phenomenal lens. Doesn't have zoom though, which is fun. Shut up, Facebook. This lens, so basically when the T3i is coming, these are the lenses that there are to choose from. This is the kit lens. It's a zoom lens. One of the things that kind of sucks about it is it has variable focal length. And basically, I'll just show you what that does.
Isn't that the one that came with the camera?
Correct.
Okay.
You know, and the thing with kit lenses is they are not great at anything, but they're okay at everything. They're really like the versatile, get some stuff done kind of camera. Yeah. So, and like you can spend a lot of money on lenses, but you can get a nicer lens. So see how it got a lot darker because I'm not able to open that aperture nearly as wide. And with the variable focal length, when you zoom, it gets, let's just go over here, even darker. Because if you watch this f-stop, it changes to 5.6. With a nicer lens, you get a fixed focal length, but that's not a luxury here. So we can then go into settings, turn off the ISO, maybe, and then you got a bright enough shot. Another thing you'll notice, it's a lot wider angle. This is stuck at 50 millimeters. That goes from 17 to 55 millimeters. So basically this lens is like that all the time.
Yeah.
But again, you get an amazing picture out of these kinds of lenses. A lot of the times with filmmakers, they don't use zoom lenses. They pretty much are strictly prime lenses because of the image quality that you get out of them. Because they're so nice. Oh, they're so nice. So that was kind of like a little spiel on lenses. I thought would be good. And for like my videos, if you've seen any of my videos, I pretty much use this lens for everything. Like everything. In fact, let's see here. When was the last time I even used this lens? I think it was my rock, paper, scissors video. That's the last time I used this lens. Yeah. And that was September. Everything else has been that lens. So, it's a little bit harder to work with, and it's not as flexible as this lens, but the quality you get out of it is so worth it. Now it's super bright. Now I'm going to change that. Okay. There we go. And then you can tell how much more crisp that image is. I mean, just this. That TV's 1080i, apparently. Garbage. It's useless. Okay, let's see, what else we got left? We can go into gear. So, obviously, this is a tripod. I think you know what a tripod is and how it's used.
Please explain it.
Okay, well, you extend the legs and you kind of pop them out and you put the camera on it. It's fantastic. Tripod, done. it's something that I actually don't use that much, because what I use is my own little contraption, shoulder rig. Shoulder rigs are just as they sound, on your shoulders, and it holds the camera, so it steadies the shot, so like, here, I'll give you a good example. So, this is what, let's record a little bit, let's just, oh, that's interesting how that's skewed. Oh, interesting. Well, I'm sure it'll be fine. Alright, so that's handheld, right? Now, if I want to use a shoulder rig, well, that's inconvenient. Get out of the way. It's still inconvenient. Well, you're just going to leave for now, alright? Okay. Well, then you should go there. Can't see it. This is with the shoulder rig, right? And that might have messed it up a little bit because I was like this. not necessarily the sturdiest way to hold a camera. So if you watch the video, so this is the first shot with just handheld, right? No. Okay. You guys are very attentive. That's pretty great. But as you can see, that is so much more stable. I mean, so nice. Quality.
You have him like a mobster over here. No big deal.
So, this thing I use for absolutely everything, and without the quick release plate, it cost me $8 to build.
Cheap.
Just throwing that out. It's actually kind of like my claim to fame right now on YouTube, because Indie Mobile, the channel I was telling you about, featured it on one of their Mobile or Made videos, because they have a segment called Mobile or Made, where people send in their videos, whether it's tutorials or short films or music videos, whatever, and they show like 5 videos for each episode. And mine was featured on that, and I've gained several hundred subscribers from that.
Cool.
So you made that design yourself?
Correct.
Oh wow. Because I've seen a design, not similar to that, but it was like a counterbalance. It had like a 5-pound weigh-in.
Oh yeah, Zach King's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I tried building it, it's really shitty.
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking.
I mean-
there's got to be a better way.
Yeah,
And
for
that's-
steady cams, like, I mean, really, you have to have a gimbal and ball bearings. Like, that's a whole nother world. If you get into steady cams, it's where the cheap steady cams, which are $700, it has like a bar and a handle that is on a bearing, and then at the bottom of the bar there's counterweights, and you put weights on each side according to like what kind of lens you're using, stuff like that, and you balance it out, and you can get a really steady shot, like a super steady shot. Then when you start getting into the really fun stuff, you have a body harness, and it comes out like this crazy contraption, like is all free moving and stuff. It's insane. And those are thousands of dollars. So you're not using any of them anytime soon. So yeah, I use my shoulder rig for just about everything I do, because I feel like it gives it a more real look. Tripod, like, again, different gear is used for different kinds of shots. Tripod is essential for certain kinds of shots, whereas this, I like this more for a lot of certain shots. It gives it a much less static feel. So that's something to keep in consideration. And of course, the quick release plates, I bought these on Amazon, and it just helps to, switch it back and forth super easy. But you don't need them. I've just got these. I haven't made a video with these yet. And I've been making videos for a year and a half. So, you don't necessarily need them, they're just nice for efficiency. Then there are slider shots. Slider shots are fantastic. I love slider shots. And basically, usually it's like this device where you mount the camera on it and it's on a track, and you move it, and it's like a very smooth moving. It's very cinematic. It's beautiful. Well, those are also usually pretty expensive. So, what I use, broken tripod, mounted it onto some PVC, set it on this.
Oh.
And I can get a damn good looking slider shots with this. So, I think I mentioned it earlier, but for me, limited resources breeds creativity. And you learn what you got. And you can still get an awesome shot. It doesn't look very professional, so I wouldn't take that to a gig if you're like a paid cinematographer. Like, you probably want to get invest in a slider. So people aren't like, why did you get this? That's really unprofessional, you're fine. So, slider shots. And then there's also cranes and jibs, but those are crazy. Basically, you put the camera on the end of this like crane thing, and as you like tilt it, it can move on pulleys, and it's I want one. Ew. But that's also, if I want to build it, it's a lot of work. There are builds out there. There are builds out there. Not many. What else is there? There we go.
Okay, so blah, 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 we all right? Got the gear. All right. Ready to roll.
So, lighting. Lighting is next. Come on. Get to your spot. So,
Maybe it's it.
yeah. Lighting is insanely important. Like, ridiculously important. So, you have the shot set up, right? It looks like that. And it looks good, right? It looks good.
I think it looks great.
Oh, let's not get cocky. Then throw some light in there, and this is a can light. It says $6 at Home Depot, and they're very widely used for cheap filmmakers.
You can
So-
put up to a 200-watt bulb in there.
Oh, you can. Oh, yeah, you've done it. It says 150 watt.
Actually, for a standard bulb, you can run 200 watts. Just like,
Oh, interesting. But yeah, as you can see, like that lit up the features of his face. Like it's subtle, but it really does make a huge difference. Now, when working with the camera, the best light is the sun. Hands down, no questions asked. So if I use, actually no, I wouldn't use this. So the image where I did the zooming on him outside was set to f8. So if I were to set this to f8, and oh yeah, not to mention it was also at ISO. Oh no, it's at ISO 100. So yeah, that's what it would look like in here. The sun is insanely powerful for lighting. Like it doesn't make sense because like you go outside and it's bright, but you have bright lighting and it's it's bright, but the difference is insane. So if you can shoot outside, do it, because that is obviously very unusable. Let's bring that back. Yeah, and outside this would just be a white image. That's just how it is. So, another thing for lighting, if you're outside, you can use what's called diffusers or reflectors. Pretty self-explanatory. A reflector you use to bounce the light onto something. So if the sun is kind of behind them, it's nice to have the sun behind them because if it's directly on someone, it casts pretty harsh shadows. But if it's behind them and you use like a bounce board, sometimes what it's called, it reflects some of that white off a light surface, and it just kind of adds lighting to facial features that are otherwise shadowed. So that's one thing. And then diffusers you can put between a light source and the subject, and it sort of doesn't matter. One thing I did, because I'm poor. This is a Tupperware container that I used as a sort of diffuser thing. So we'll just have some fun here. So I'll turn this up. I'll turn it all the way up. And this is another thing that I made. This is a dimmer switch that I sort of made. So it's really handy, let me tell you. So if we turn this all the way up, We have this light source on him. I mean, yeah, pretty good. And if you start, let's see. You take that off, and it becomes pretty harsh. I mean, pretty harsh shadows. And then you put this back, and it's a lot softer. It helps to basically takes that direct light and just kind of goes. That's the best description I can come up with for that.
The sound effects.
Thank you. It's exactly how it sounds. Okay, you can be a filmmaker? Open up, man. Cool. You should make your own too. Just saying. Just throwing that out there. You guys each make one and help each other. It'll be good.
We'll just make.
Maybe we'll get first and second. Okay. So then there's another thing called three-point lighting. Basically, three-point lighting is there's a key light, a fill light, and a backlight. And that helps to make a subject stand out on a scene. So the backlight adds, basically adds contrast, or sharpness, wrong word, sharpness around the edges of the person. So if you ever see any green screen work, there's the three-point lighting system where there's key light, which is the main light, a fill light, which is a light to kind of fill in the shadowy areas, and then the hair light is also what it's often referred to. Shines on the back of them, so it helps separate them from the green screen. Same thing applies to if you're shooting video, it helps separate them from the rest of that scene. And it really does make a pretty big difference. So yeah. Alright, so yeah, lighting's very important. Always is. If you have a really shitty lit scene, people will notice. And that's another thing that's really nice about having that wide open aperture lens is lighting is, you can work with lighting so much better. And you can work in a lot lower light situations. Okay, let's see here. Actually, that's all we got written down. Yeah, good. So, let's do something. So, we can, oh, this is still here, convenient. I was wondering about this. This is good. So we're gonna make a scene. Oh man, these are this quality. Good stuff. Alright. So, let's see. What scene do we want to do? Do we want to do, like we're only gonna do like one little scene from our video that we had planned. The stairs?
Stairs?
Well, we can get the tripod shot in there.
That would be good. Post production next week.
Alright, so basically it's planned out where the main character is walking down one side of the stairs, and another character, like we do two different shots, where the other character is then walking up the stairs. We're going to reverse that in post, so it's timed the same way. And then we're going to have, like, in the middle, we're going to have the camera going down, like a person kind of looking over, like, the main character, like, what the f*** are you doing? Sort of a thing, right? So, simple scene. And so the long shot is definitely this. Oh, I didn't talk about audio. That's what I was missing. I knew I was missing something. Okay. Audio. Super important. Very overlooked. Very, very overlooked by people that are just starting out with video. For me, my basic setup usually looks like this. So, I end up having to sync the audio in post. And basically what I do is I turn on my audio recorder, which is the third place prize. I use it for every one of my videos. The reason I do that is because this has a much better preamp built into it, so it processes audio a lot better. It doesn't do auto gain control. You're in control, and it's super size. And the camera's preamps are shitty. It's just the reality. You can get by. I didn't start using this until like 3 months ago. So I went over a year without it. But I do now know, I notice the difference now. You guys, I don't think, are going to have to worry too much about it. It's one of the higher end practices. But basically what I do is I have these on, I start recording the camera, start recording that, and then what I do is I have, like my friend Ryan, because we're usually the ones working on the videos, is I have him clap. What that does is when you pull the footage as well as the audio into your editor, you can see the audio wavelengths, and you'll see a huge spike. That is where the clap is. You can then line those up, delete the audio from the camera, and sync it with the video with the good quality audio, and golden. It's extra work, but it's worth it. It is worth it. I was trying to think of how we're going to work that out. If we want to open the other one, let people use it. Because right now OTB doesn't like, you're sort of going through this like remodeling, if you will,
Yeah.
of what OTB
We're trying to
consists
take
of.
our technology from the 90s up to the 21st century, essentially, so. Yeah.
Yeah. So they're getting the new cameras, and then were you going to be getting these setups? What are you thinking?
Maybe, I don't know, we already have some shotgun mics like that.
True. Very true. So, I guess I can talk about shotgun mics. Okay, so with shotgun mics, they're awesome. This microphone is the Rode Video mic. It's $150, and it comes with this shock mount as well as dead cat. This goes over it, and it's a windscreen, basically. It protects the microphone from wind, and it works insane wonders. It's powered by a 9-volt battery. Okay, so basically, I gotta see if I can remember exactly how this is constructed. So with a shotgun microphone, it's a directional mic. So one thing, so let's just, for fun, let's just try this out. Okay, so I'm going to just chord. Okay. Now, if it works properly, you should notice a significant difference as I went around the microphone. Now this is going to probably sound pretty hollow because the line into that just sounds stupid. But it does sound a lot better. Now, if it works properly, you should notice a significant difference as... Wait, did I start recording that after this?
Yeah.
Damn it! Okay. Actually, I'm going to do that.
I can
Stay.
That was like when I first. It was so embarrassing.
Do you like Windows 8?
I love it. Absolutely love it. It's fantastic. Okay. So, I'm just going to use it like this. See if that works. Oh, gosh dang it, now it's, oh man, okay, 1 second. This thing, it's kind of interesting sometimes.
Right.
how it faded in like that, because anything on the side, it kind of blocks it out because it's almost a tunnel from the front until it gets to the microphone. So it really does block out a lot of the side noise. That's what shotgun makes. That was fun. And audio is still something that I'm working on. It's incredibly important, and I like to think I have good audio, but it's something I'm still learning. Thankfully, I'm learning it because oh my gosh, it makes a huge difference. What else is there? I mean, there's lavalier mics where those are microphones that are like clipped onto a person. They're omnidirectional. They're not like a shotgun mic or anything, but they're very close range, so you don't really get the background noise. This is the mic on this is a stereo mic, so you can see that it has like an X pattern. So this is that side, this is that side, and it basically pulls from the two sides and makes it stereo, which is nice. Yeah. All right. And usually I have this set up, but sometimes if I have like a dialogue scene, what I'll do is I'll then take this off and either set up like the tripod nearby, and I'm actually going to be getting a mic stand. The mic stand has like the big thing that you can pull out and put this wherever you want, but basically just boom, microphone. And you can put that like just out of shot and leave it going as people are talking, and then it's a close up microphone, sounds really good, and the audio levels never change because you're not moving. So, it's very versatile, love this thing, love it to death. And this thing was like $80 or $90 online. Super versatile. He has the freaking H4. I want that so bad.
It is good.
Yeah. Yes, it
Use
is.
some stuff for recordings.
Use it for recordings.
I mostly want it for the XLR.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah. Because it has XLR and quarter-inch
Yep.
inputs. This only has a little 3.5 millimeter. Yeah. So, this is still super high quality. It's just not as versatile. Can't do as much with it. Okay, so I guess we can probably make a scene. So we want to do the stairs. Okay. Let's make some magic happen. So this just make that house. One thing I like about this Gorilla Pod, you can mount this thing anywhere.
Does that come with the?
Yeah. They're like $20 though, they're not that bad. Look at that. Yeah. Golden. Okay. Because we really want to get the tripod for this shot. Okay, so can you take this for a moment?
What do you study here?